The evening sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as David Williams drove his black sedan through the quiet neighborhood. He had just finished visiting his mother, like he did every Sunday. The visit had gone well. She was doing better since her hip surgery, and seeing her smile always made his week feel complete. David worked as what his family believed was a financial consultant for a government contractor. The truth was far more complicated. For the past 8 years, he had been a CIA intelligence officer, working deep undercover operations that took him to places his mother would never sleep peacefully knowing about. But today he was just a son who had spent the afternoon helping his mom with her garden and listening to stories about the neighbors. He checked his watch. 6:30. Perfect timing to get home, order some takeout, and catch up on the baseball game he had recorded. Life felt normal for once, and David treasured these moments between assignments. The red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror without warning. David's training kicked in immediately, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had been pulled over exactly 3 times in his adult life, and each time had been routine. Clean record, clean car, clean conscience. Well, mostly clean conscience. He pulled over to the curb and rolled down his window, placing both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. The first rule of staying alive was never giving anyone a reason to feel threatened. 2 officers approached his car. The older one was tall with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His name tag read Stevens. The younger officer hung back slightly, hand resting near his weapon. His tag said Rodriguez. License and registration, Stevens said without any greeting. Of course, officer. David reached slowly for his wallet, narrating his movements. I'm reaching for my wallet in my jacket pocket. His voice was steady, professional. Years of briefings with foreign contacts had taught him how to stay calm under pressure. Stevens examined the license with unusual intensity. David Williams. Says here you live on Oak Avenue. That's 15 minutes from here. What brings you to this neighborhood? I was visiting my mother. She lives on Pine Street. David kept his answers short and truthful. No need to elaborate. Pine Street, huh? Stevens exchanged a look with Rodriguez. You know, we've had reports of a black male in a dark sedan casing houses in this area. You match that description pretty closely. David felt a chill run down his spine, but his expression remained neutral. Officer, I understand you're doing your job, but I was simply visiting family. My mother's address is in my phone if you need to verify. Step out of the vehicle, please. This was escalating beyond a routine traffic stop, and David knew it, but he also knew that resisting would only make things worse. He stepped out slowly, hands visible at all times. Stevens circled the car like a predator studying prey. You seem nervous, Mr. Williams. Is there something in this car you don't want us to find? I'm not nervous, officer. Just want to cooperate and get home safely. Rodriguez finally spoke up. We're going to need to search your vehicle. David's mind raced. He knew his rights, but he also knew that asserting them aggressively could escalate the situation dangerously. More importantly, there was absolutely nothing illegal in his car. A search would prove his innocence and get this over with quickly. I don't consent to a search, but I won't physically resist if you proceed, David said carefully. It was the legally correct response that also wouldn't provoke violence. Stevens smiled, but it wasn't friendly. That's interesting. Innocent people usually don't mind searches, but we smell marijuana coming from your vehicle, which gives us probable cause. David almost laughed. He had never used drugs in his life. His security clearance required regular testing, and even alcohol was something he used sparingly. But he recognized the game being played now. Officer, I don't use drugs. You won't find anything in my car. We'll see about that. Stevens opened the driver's side door and began searching. Rodriguez watched David while glancing occasionally at the car. For 5 minutes, Stevens went through every compartment, every corner, every possible hiding spot. David watched with growing confidence. There was literally nothing to find. Then Stevens opened the glove compartment for the second time. Well, look what we have here. Stevens held up a small plastic bag containing white powder. David's blood turned to ice. That's not mine. They always say that. Stevens sealed the bag in an evidence envelope. David Williams, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, David's mind worked frantically. The bag hadn't been there during the first search of the glove compartment. He had seen Stevens go through it thoroughly. This was a setup, but why? Random corruption? Or something more targeted? Rodriguez read him his rights while Stevens called in the arrest. David listened to every word, committing details to memory. In his line of work, details could mean the difference between life and death. Tonight, they might mean the difference between freedom and prison. The ride to the police station was silent except for the radio chatter. David stared out the window, watching his normal life disappear behind a wall of flashing lights and bureaucratic procedures. He couldn't call his CIA handler directly. That would blow his cover and potentially compromise ongoing operations. But he also couldn't let this false charge destroy everything he had worked for. At the station, the booking process began. Fingerprints, photographs, paperwork. David answered questions with his cover identity intact. Financial consultant, clean record, no known associates with criminal backgrounds. Everything by the book. They allowed him one phone call. David dialed a number that would reach his handler, Agent Lisa Park, but would sound like a law firm to anyone listening. When the familiar voice answered, he spoke carefully. "This is David Williams. I need to speak with Attorney Johnson about a consulting contract that's gone wrong. I'm at the downtown precinct and I need immediate legal representation for a contract dispute." There was a pause. "I understand, Mr. Williams. Someone will be in touch within the hour." The call ended and David was led to a holding cell. As the metal door clanged shut, he sat on the narrow bench and tried to process what had just happened. In 8 years of dangerous undercover work, he had never felt as vulnerable as he did right now. In foreign countries, he knew the rules of the game. Here, in his own country, wearing his real name and living his real life, he felt completely exposed. Stevens and Rodriguez were filling out paperwork at their desks, laughing about something. David watched them through the bars and realized this wasn't their first time playing this game. They moved with the confidence of people who had never faced consequences for their actions, but they had no idea who they were messing with. David Williams, the financial consultant, might be powerless in this situation. David Williams, the CIA officer, had resources they couldn't imagine. The question was whether he could access those resources without destroying the life he had built as a cover. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. In a few hours, this would either be resolved quietly, or it would become the beginning of something much bigger than two corrupt cops picking on the wrong person. David closed his eyes and began to plan. The fluorescent lights in the public defender's office buzzed like angry insects as Rachel Torres reviewed her newest case file. David Williams, 34, charged with possession of cocaine. On paper, it looked routine, another drug case in a system overloaded with them. But something about the arrest report made her pause. Rachel had been a public defender for 6 years. She had seen every variation of drug arrest, every excuse, every story. Most of her clients were guilty of something, even if not exactly what they were charged with. But David Williams felt different from the moment she met him. He sat across from her desk in an orange jumpsuit, but somehow managed to look dignified. His posture was straight, his eyes alert, and when he spoke, his words were measured and precise. Not the usual desperate rambling she heard from clients facing serious charges. "Ms. Torres, I want to be completely clear about something. I have never used illegal drugs in my life. That substance was not mine, and I have no idea how it got into my car." Rachel had heard variations of this speech 1,000 times, but something in David's tone made her actually listen. "Tell me exactly what happened during the traffic stop." David recounted the events with remarkable detail. He remembered the exact time, the officers' badge numbers, even specific phrases they had used. Most people's memories got fuzzy under stress, but David's account was precise and consistent. "You're certain Officer Stevens searched the glove compartment twice?" Rachel asked. "Absolutely certain. The first time he went through everything thoroughly. When he opened it the second time, suddenly there was a bag that hadn't been there before." Rachel made notes, but tried not to let hope creep into her voice. "David, I have to ask this directly. What do you do for work? Your employment record shows you work for Hamilton Financial Group, but the details are pretty vague." David hesitated for just a moment. "I'm a consultant. I handle sensitive financial matters for government contractors. The work requires discretion." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Rachel caught the careful phrasing. In her experience, people who spoke that precisely usually had something to hide, but hiding something didn't make him guilty of drug possession. After David was escorted back to his cell, Rachel pulled up the arrest records for Officers Stevens and Rodriguez. What she found made her stomach turn. In the past 2 years, Stevens had made 47 drug-related arrests. Every single one involved a black male between the ages of 20 and 40. Every single one resulted in a conviction or plea bargain. Rodriguez had a shorter record, but the pattern was identical. Young black men, small amounts of drugs, no witnesses except the officers themselves. Rachel printed out the records and spread them across her desk. The more she studied them, the more suspicious they became. The amounts were always small enough to avoid federal charges, but large enough for serious state penalties. The locations were always in nice neighborhoods where the defendants claimed to be visiting family or friends. And in every case, dash cam footage was either missing or corrupted. She picked up her phone and called Detective Kevin Murphy in Internal Affairs. Kevin was one of the few cops she trusted to actually investigate other cops. "Kevin, it's Rachel Torres. I need you to look into something for me." "Let me guess. Another client claiming police misconduct? This one's different. I'm looking at a pattern involving Officer Stevens and Rodriguez. 47 arrests in 2 years, all following the same script." There was silence on the other end. Finally, Kevin spoke. "Rachel, Stevens has been on the force for 15 years. He's got commendations, positive reviews. Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure about the numbers. Whether they mean what I think they mean, that's what I need you to help me figure out." Kevin agreed to look into it quietly. Rachel hung up and turned back to David's file. There was something else bothering her about the case. David's background check showed he had no criminal record, not even a traffic ticket. His credit score was excellent. His employment history was steady. Everything about him suggested someone who followed rules and avoided trouble. So why would someone like that suddenly start carrying cocaine? The next morning, Rachel drove to the neighborhood where David was arrested. Pine Street was exactly what she expected. Well-maintained houses, nice cars in the driveways, the kind of place where a young black man might attract unwanted attention just by being there. She found the house David claimed to be visiting and knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, and her face lit up when Rachel mentioned David's name. "Oh, that's my son David. He comes every Sunday to help me with things around the house. Such a good boy. Is he in some kind of trouble?" Mrs. Williams invited Rachel in for coffee and spent an hour showing her pictures of David from childhood through college. The story never changed. David was responsible, educated, and devoted to his family. Nothing about him suggested drug use. "Ms. Williams, has David ever been in trouble with the law?" "Never. David's always been careful about following rules. Even as a child, he would get upset if other kids were doing something they weren't supposed to do." Rachel left Mrs. Williams' house with more questions than answers. Everything about David's background contradicted the charges against him. But she had also learned something interesting. Mrs. Williams mentioned that David's work took him traveling frequently, sometimes for weeks at a time. She was proud that he worked for the government, helping keep the country safe. Government work, classified financial consulting, frequent travel. The pieces didn't quite fit together, but they suggested David's job might be more complicated than he was letting on. Back at her office, Rachel found a message from Kevin Murphy. He wanted to meet that evening somewhere private. That wasn't his usual style, which meant he had found something significant. They met at a diner outside the city, the kind of place where cops went when they didn't want to be seen talking to defense lawyers. Kevin looked tired and worried. "Rachel, you need to be very careful with this case." "What did you find?" Kevin pulled out a folder and set it on the table between them. "Stevens and Rodriguez aren't just making arrests. They're part of something bigger. We've been tracking missing evidence from the department, drugs that disappear from the evidence room only to show up on the street again." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "You think they're selling confiscated drugs?" "I think they're doing more than that. The cocaine found in your client's car? It matches the chemical signature of a batch that went missing from evidence 3 weeks ago. It was supposed to be from a major bust, but half of it never made it to the lab. So they planted evidence that they stole from their own evidence room."
That's what it looks like.
"But Rachel, if this goes public before we have a solid case, a lot of convictions could get overturned. We're talking about hundreds of cases, millions of dollars in prosecutions." Rachel understood the implications. The district attorney's office would fight hard to prevent this from coming to light. David's case wasn't just about one wrongful arrest. It was potentially the thread that could unravel years of corruption. "Kevin, I need you to document everything. If this goes to trial, I need evidence that can't be dismissed or buried." I'm trying, but Stevens has friends in high places. Word is already getting around that someone's asking questions about him. That night, Rachel worked late in her office building David's defense, but she also realized she was building something much bigger. If she could prove David was framed, she might be able to expose a corruption network that had destroyed dozens of lives. The question was whether she could do it before that same network destroyed David Williams and possibly her career along with it. Her phone rang at midnight. The caller ID showed David's emergency contact number. Ms. Torres, this is Agent Lisa Park. I believe you're representing David Williams. We need to talk. Who is this? Someone who can help David, but we need to meet in person. There are things about this case that you don't understand yet. Rachel agreed to meet the next morning. As she hung up, she realized David's case had just become even more complicated. Government agents didn't usually get involved in simple drug possession cases. Whatever David Williams really did for a living, it was about to become the key to everything. The coffee shop on 5th Street buzzed with morning activity as Rachel Torres waited for Agent Lisa Park. She had arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could watch the entrance. Everything about this case had made her cautious, and meeting with a federal agent only heightened her concerns. Agent Park walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. Mid-40s, professional but not intimidating, the kind of person who could blend into any crowd. She ordered a simple black coffee and joined Rachel at the corner table. Ms. Torres, thank you for meeting with me. Before we begin, I need you to understand that this conversation is completely off the record. I'm not agreeing to anything until I know who you are and what your interest is in my client. Lisa smiled slightly. Fair enough. I work for an agency that occasionally employs consultants like David Williams. I can't be more specific than that, but I can tell you that David is exactly who he says he is. A good man who got caught in a very bad situation. Rachel studied the woman across from her. If David works for the government, why doesn't he just prove it? Show his credentials, call his supervisors? Because the work David does requires him to maintain his cover identity at all costs. Even being arrested is preferable to exposing certain operations. The pieces started falling into place for Rachel. He's intelligence. Lisa neither confirmed nor denied this. What I can tell you is that David has been under surveillance by people who shouldn't have access to that kind of information. The officers who arrested him knew more about his movements than they should have. Are you saying Stevens and Rodriguez specifically targeted David? I'm saying that David's name appeared in places it shouldn't have appeared. Someone with access to classified databases has been sharing information. Rachel felt the case expanding beyond anything she had imagined. So this isn't just about planted drugs. It's about a leak in intelligence services. I can't discuss ongoing investigations, but I can tell you that David's arrest was not random. And if he goes to prison, it could compromise operations that are vital to national security. After Agent Park left, Rachel returned to her office with a new understanding of the stakes. David wasn't just an innocent man facing false charges. He was a federal agent whose cover had been blown, possibly by the same corrupt network that was framing him. She called Detective Murphy and asked him to dig deeper into Stevens and Rodriguez's financial records. If they were selling drugs and sharing classified information, there should be evidence of unexplained income. Meanwhile, David sat in his cell, watching the news on the small television mounted near the ceiling. The local station was running a story about increased drug arrests in suburban neighborhoods. The reporter interviewed District Attorney William Harrison, who talked tough about cracking down on dealers who brought drugs into family communities. David recognized the political theater. Harrison was up for re-election in 6 months, and he needed high-profile convictions to look strong on crime. David's case was exactly the kind Harrison would want to prosecute aggressively. That afternoon, Rachel visited David again. She couldn't tell him about her conversation with Agent Park, but she could share what Detective Murphy had discovered. David, the cocaine found in your car came from police evidence storage. It wasn't street drugs. It was evidence from another case that went missing from their own evidence room. David's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. So they're not just planting evidence, they're stealing it first. It looks that way. But David, there's something else. Detective Murphy found financial irregularities in both officers' bank accounts. Large cash deposits that don't match their salaries. How large? Stevens has deposited over $50,000 in cash in the past year. Rodriguez about $30,000. David was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Torres, hypothetically, if someone was selling police evidence back onto the street, who would they sell it to? Drug dealers, I suppose. People who could move it quickly without asking questions. And if those same people wanted information about potential targets, say someone they suspected might be law enforcement or intelligence, Rachel saw where he was going. They might pay for access to databases that could confirm or deny those suspicions. Hypothetically. That evening, Rachel worked late, building a defense strategy that could expose the corruption without revealing David's true identity. It was like trying to solve a puzzle while half the pieces were classified. Her research was interrupted by a call from Detective Murphy. He sounded stressed. "Rachel, we have a problem. Someone broke into the Internal Affairs evidence room last night. Several files related to Stevens and Rodriguez are missing." "What kind of files?" "Financial records, witness statements, surveillance footage. Everything we've been building." Rachel felt her stomach drop. "Kevin, someone knows we're investigating." "It gets worse. I got pulled into the captain's office today. He suggested I might want to focus on other cases, let sleeping dogs lie." The message was clear. The corruption went higher than just 2 patrol officers. People with real power wanted this investigation stopped. Rachel hung up and stared at her computer screen. She had been naive to think she could quietly expose this network. They had been watching from the beginning, and now they were actively working to protect themselves, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed David Williams was just another victim they could crush. They had no idea he had resources they couldn't imagine. Rachel picked up her phone and called Agent Park's number. "Ms. Torres? Is everything secure?"
"No, it's not."
"The local investigation has been compromised. They know we're onto them. I was afraid this might happen. Can you meet me tonight? Same place but later, after the dinner crowd clears out." At 10 o'clock, Rachel sat in the nearly empty coffee shop waiting. Agent Park arrived with a man she didn't recognize. Tall, serious, wearing an expensive suit that looked government-issued. "Ms. Torres, this is Agent Thompson. He handles security for David's department." Agent Thompson got straight to the point. "Ms. Torres, David's cover has been completely blown. The people who arrested him know exactly who he is and what he does for a living." "How is that possible?" "Someone with high-level security clearance has been selling information. David's identity, his movements, his family connections. It's all been compromised." Rachel tried to process this. So the arrest wasn't just about corrupt cops making money. It was about neutralizing a federal agent. "We believe David was being set up for something much worse than a drug charge. If the frame-up had worked, he would have been sent to a prison where certain inmates were waiting for him." The implication was chilling. Rachel realized they weren't just trying to destroy David's career. They were trying to get him killed. "What do you need from me?" Agent Park leaned forward. "We need you to win this case. Not just get the charges dropped, but expose the entire network. It's the only way to protect David and shut down the leak." "But if I expose everything in court, won't that reveal David's real identity?" Agent Thompson nodded grimly. "David's undercover career is over regardless. The question now is whether he survives long enough to start a new life." Rachel looked at both agents. "What aren't you telling me? The corruption doesn't stop with street cops selling drugs. It goes all the way to people who have access to the most sensitive intelligence in the country." David stumbled into something much bigger than he realized. As Rachel drove home that night, she understood the full scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just about defending an innocent client. She was about to go to war with a network that had infiltrated both local law enforcement and federal intelligence agencies. They had unlimited resources, political connections, and a willingness to kill to protect themselves. All she had was the truth and a client who couldn't even tell her his real name. But sometimes, that was enough. The courthouse buzzed with nervous energy as David Williams' trial began. District Attorney William Harrison had personally taken over the prosecution, bringing his A-team of assistants and making sure every local news station knew this was a priority case. To the public, it looked like tough law enforcement in action. To those who knew the truth, it felt like a show trial. David sat at the defense table in a Navy suit that Agent Park had somehow arranged for him. He looked every inch the professional financial consultant he claimed to be. Only Rachel Torres knew the tremendous pressure he was under, maintaining his cover story while watching his real life crumble around him. Harrison's opening statement was everything Rachel had expected. He painted David as a drug dealer who had foolishly brought his criminal enterprise into a respectable neighborhood. The evidence was simple and clear-cut, Harrison claimed. Police officers doing their job had discovered illegal drugs in the defendant's possession. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Harrison concluded, this is not a complicated case. The defendant was caught red-handed with cocaine in his vehicle. No amount of clever legal maneuvering can change that basic fact. Rachel's opening was more cautious. She couldn't reveal what she knew about intelligence operations or corruption networks. Instead, she focused on what she could prove. Members of the jury, you're going to hear testimony from 2 police officers who claim they found drugs in my client's car. But you're also going to see evidence that those same officers have a pattern of making remarkably similar arrests. Always young black men, always small amounts of drugs, always in nice neighborhoods, and always without any corroborating evidence beyond their word. Officer Stevens took the stand first. He was confident, experienced, and completely believable. He described pulling David over for matching a suspect description, smelling marijuana, and conducting a legal search that revealed cocaine in the glove compartment. The defendant seemed nervous and evasive, Stevens testified. In my 15 years of experience, those are clear indicators of criminal activity. Harrison walked Stevens through every detail of the arrest. The testimony was smooth, practiced, and completely fabricated. But to a jury that didn't know better, it sounded entirely credible. Rachel's cross-examination began gently. She asked about Stevens' training, his experience, his record of arrests. Stevens answered confidently, proud of his service record. Officer Stevens, in the past 2 years, how many drug-related arrests have you made? I'd estimate around 50. Drug crimes are a serious problem in our community. And of those 50 arrests, how many involved white defendants? Stevens paused slightly. I don't make arrests based on race, counselor. I arrest criminals regardless of their background. Rachel produced a chart she had prepared. Officer Stevens, I've reviewed your arrest records. In the past 2 years, you've made 47 drug-related arrests. 47. Every single one involved a black male between the ages of 20 and 40. Would you call that a coincidence? Harrison objected, but the judge allowed the question. Stevens shifted uncomfortably. Counselor, I patrol areas where drug activity is common. I can't control the demographics of criminal behavior. But you weren't patrolling a high-crime area when you arrested my client, were you? Maple Street is one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. Drug dealers go wherever they think they can operate without detection. Rachel nodded and moved to her next line of attack. Officer Stevens, you testified that you searched the glove compartment and found cocaine. Is that correct? Yes. Did you search the glove compartment only once? Stevens hesitated for just a moment. I may have looked through it more than once to be thorough. According to your own police report, you conducted a systematic search of the entire vehicle. That would include the glove compartment, correct? Correct. So if there had been drugs in the glove compartment during your initial search, you would have found them then? Yes, but no further questions. Officer Rodriguez's testimony followed the same pattern. Confident presentation, suspicious details under cross-examination. Rachel focused on the missing dashcam footage, a recurring theme in both officers' arrests. Officer Rodriguez, your patrol car is equipped with a dashboard camera, correct? Yes, ma'am. And that camera should have recorded the entire traffic stop? It should have, but there was a technical malfunction. Rachel pulled out a stack of papers. Officer Rodriguez, I have maintenance records for your patrol car. According to these records, the dashboard camera system was inspected and certified as fully functional just 3 days before my client's arrest. Can you explain how a certified system suddenly malfunctioned? Rodriguez glanced nervously at Stevens. Equipment fails sometimes. It's not uncommon. In fact, according to departmental records, dashboard cameras have malfunctioned during 17 of your last 20 arrests. Would you consider that unusual? I'm not a technical expert, counselor. The prosecution's case was beginning to show cracks, but Rachel knew she needed more than suspicious coincidences. She needed hard evidence. Her first defense witness was Dr. Patricia Chen, a forensic expert who had analyzed the cocaine found in David's car. Dr. Chen was thorough, professional, and devastating to the prosecution's case. The substance analyzed showed no fingerprints from the defendant, Dr. Chen testified. More significantly, it contained trace chemicals consistent with police evidence storage bags, not street-level packaging. Harrison tried to discredit the testimony, But Dr. Chen had 30 years of experience and an impeccable reputation. Her conclusion was clear. The cocaine had come from police evidence storage, not from any drug dealer. Rachel's second witness was Detective Murphy from Internal Affairs. Despite pressure from his supervisors, Murphy had agreed to testify about the financial irregularities he had discovered. Detective Murphy, did you find unusual financial activity in the bank accounts of Officer Stevens and Rodriguez? Yes, both officers made large cash deposits that couldn't be explained by their police salaries. How large? Officer Stevens deposited over $50,000 in the past year. Officer Rodriguez approximately $30,000. Harrison's objection was sustained, but the jury had heard the numbers. Police officers making unexplained cash deposits while arresting people for drug crimes created an obvious question about corruption. The breakthrough came during Harrison's redirect examination of Officer Stevens. Frustrated by the defense's attacks on his character, Stevens made a crucial error. Mr. Harrison, I want the jury to understand something. David Williams isn't some innocent financial consultant. We've been watching him for months. His travel patterns, his contacts, his activities. We know exactly what kind of person he is. Rachel was on her feet instantly. Objection! There's nothing in the police report about any surveillance or investigation of my client. The judge sustained the objection, but it was too late. Stevens had revealed that David had been under surveillance, information that wasn't part of the official arrest record. The only way police could have conducted that kind of surveillance was with access to federal databases, or by working with federal agencies. During recess, Rachel cornered Stevens in the hallway. Officer Stevens, you just testified that you had been watching my client for months. Under whose authority? Stevens realized his mistake. I misspoke. We had received general reports about suspicious activity in the area. Reports from whom? There's no documentation of any investigation into my client. Stevens walked away without answering, but Rachel had what she needed. The surveillance Stevens had mentioned wasn't local police work. It was intelligence-level monitoring that required federal cooperation. That evening, Agent Park called Rachel with urgent news. The surveillance Stevens mentioned? We've traced it. Someone with access to our systems has been tracking David for 6 months. Every movement, every contact, every routine. They knew exactly when and where to arrest him. Who has that level of access? That's what we're trying to figure out. But Rachel, you need to know something. David's identity isn't the only thing that's been compromised. They have information about other agents, other operations. This is bigger than we thought. As Rachel prepared for the next day's testimony, she realized the trial had become about much more than David's innocence. It was about exposing a network that had infiltrated the highest levels of law enforcement and intelligence services. Tomorrow, she would call David Williams to testify in his own defense. But she still didn't know if the man taking the stand would be the financial consultant or the CIA agent. Either way, his testimony was going to change everything. The courtroom was packed as David Williams took the witness stand. Word had spread that this drug case had become something much bigger. Local reporters filled the gallery, sensing a story that could make careers. What they didn't know was that they were about to witness the exposure of a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of government. David raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. For 8 years, his life had been built on carefully constructed lies. Today, that was about to change forever. Rachel began with safe questions. David's background, his education, his work as a financial consultant. He answered calmly, sticking to his cover story while the jury studied his demeanor. He looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a respectable professional who had been wrongly accused. Mr. Williams, had you ever been arrested before the incident on Maple Street? Never. Have you ever used illegal drugs? Never. On the evening you were arrested, why were you in that neighborhood? I was visiting my mother, like I do every Sunday. I had helped her with some household tasks and was driving home when the officers pulled me over. David's testimony was straightforward and believable. But Rachel knew the real test would come when District Attorney Harrison began his cross-examination. Harrison approached the witness stand like a predator circling wounded prey. He had built his career on breaking down defendants, exposing their lies, proving their guilt. He had no idea he was about to face someone trained to withstand interrogation by foreign intelligence services. Mr. Williams, You claim to be a financial consultant. What exactly does that involve? I analyze financial data for government contractors. Much of my work involves sensitive information that requires security clearances. Security clearances? What level of security clearance do you hold? David paused slightly. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of my clearance level. Harrison smiled, thinking he had found an opening. So you admit you work with classified information? I work with sensitive financial data, yes. And this work requires you to travel frequently? Sometimes. Harrison produced a file and approached the witness stand. Mr. Williams, I have records showing that you've traveled internationally 17 times in the past 2 years. Brazil, Colombia, Afghanistan, several countries in Eastern Europe. That seems like unusual travel for a financial consultant. Rachel was on her feet. Objection. Mr. Williams' travel records are not relevant to the charges. Your Honor, Harrison replied, the defendant's travel patterns are highly relevant to his credibility and possible drug connections. Judge Martinez allowed the questioning to continue, but Rachel could see where this was heading. Harrison was fishing, trying to paint David as an international drug dealer based on his travel history. Mr. Williams, can you explain why a financial consultant would need to travel to countries known for drug trafficking? David's answer was measured and careful. My work takes me wherever my clients have financial interests. I can't discuss the specifics due to confidentiality agreements. Harrison pressed harder. Isn't it true that you're not really a financial consultant? Isn't it true that your frequent international travel and security clearances indicate involvement in illegal activities? This was the moment Rachel had been dreading. David could maintain his cover and let Harrison's implications hang in the air, or he could tell the truth and blow 8 years of undercover work. Before David could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Agent Lisa Park walked in, followed by Agent Thompson and 2 other federal agents. They moved with purpose toward the front of the courtroom. Your Honor, Agent Park announced, I'm Agent Lisa Park with the Central Intelligence Agency. I need to speak with the court immediately regarding matters of national security. The judge called for a recess and ordered everyone except the attorneys and federal agents to leave the courtroom. What happened in the next 30 minutes would determine the rest of David's life. Your Honor, Agent Park began. The man testifying as David Williams is a CIA intelligence officer who has been working undercover for 8 years. His arrest was the result of a conspiracy involving corrupt police officers and a security breach in federal intelligence databases. Judge Martinez, a military veteran, understood the implications immediately. Agent Park, are you requesting that I dismiss the charges? No, Your Honor. We're requesting that you allow us to present evidence that will prove Mr. Williams' innocence while exposing the criminal network that targeted him. Harrison was speechless. His high-profile drug case had just become a national security matter involving federal intelligence agents. Agent Thompson stepped forward with a secure laptop. Your Honor, we have surveillance footage that definitively proves the defendant's innocence and the officer's misconduct. The footage was devastating. Multiple camera angles showed the entire traffic stop from beginning to end. Officer Stevens clearly planting the cocaine during his second search of the glove compartment. Rodriguez standing watch while knowing exactly what his partner was doing. Every detail of their fabricated testimony exposed as perjury. But the footage revealed something even more shocking. Audio enhancement picked up Stevens making a phone call immediately after the arrest. It's done. Williams is in custody. The package was delivered as planned. The voice on the other end was familiar to Agent Park. Deputy Director Robert Hayes of the FBI, a man with access to the most sensitive intelligence databases in the country. Excellent. Make sure the charges stick. We can't have him asking questions about the Prague operation. Judge Martinez had presided over hundreds of criminal cases, but never one that exposed corruption at this level. Agent Park, are you telling me that this arrest was orchestrated by federal officials? Yes, Your Honor. Deputy Director Hayes has been selling intelligence to foreign contacts. David Williams was getting close to exposing the operation during his last assignment in Prague. Hayes arranged to have him framed and imprisoned to prevent that exposure. When court reconvened, the gallery was buzzing with confusion. Reporters sensed something major was happening but had no idea what. Agent Park took the witness stand and methodically laid out the evidence. The surveillance footage, the audio recordings, the financial trail showing payments from foreign intelligence services to Hayes and his network of corrupt officials. Agent Park, Rachel asked, was Officer Stevens aware of Mr. Williams's true identity when he made the arrest? Yes. Stevens and Rodriguez were recruited specifically because of their history of planting evidence on minority defendants. Hayes knew their arrests were rarely questioned by prosecutors or juries. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This wasn't just about one wrongful arrest. It was about a systematic pattern of corruption that had destroyed dozens of innocent lives. Harrison, realizing his case had completely collapsed, requested a recess to confer with his superiors. But Judge Martinez denied the request. Mr. Harrison, in light of the evidence presented, what is the state's position on the charges against Mr. Williams? Harrison had no choice. The state moves to dismiss all charges, Your Honor. But Judge Martinez wasn't finished. Agent Park, what is the status of the individuals responsible for this conspiracy? Deputy Director Hayes was arrested this morning by FBI Internal Affairs. Officers Stevens and Rodriguez are in federal custody. We've identified 12 other officials in various agencies who were part of the network. As the judge dismissed the charges, David Williams sat quietly at the defense table. His 8-year career as an undercover intelligence officer was over, exposed in open court. But he was alive and free, which was more than he had expected 24 hours earlier. Outside the courthouse, reporters bombarded Rachel with questions. She gave a brief statement about justice being served, but declined to discuss the national security aspects of the case. David found her in the parking garage an hour later. Ms. Torres, I never got the chance to properly thank you. You don't need to thank me. I was just doing my job. No, you did much more than that. You risked your career to expose the truth. Rachel studied the man she had spent weeks defending. So what happens now? Do you go back to being a financial consultant? David smiled slightly. I think that cover identity has been permanently blown. Agent Park tells me the CIA has offered me a position as an instructor at their training facility, teaching new agents how to maintain their covers under pressure. That sounds like a good fit. As David walked away, Rachel reflected on the case that had changed everything. Stevens and Rodriguez would spend decades in federal prison. Hayes and his network faced life sentences for treason. Most importantly, the wrongful convictions they had caused would be reviewed and overturned. But the real victory was simpler than that. An innocent man had been freed, and the truth had finally come to light. 3 months later, Rachel received a package with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a corrupt police ring that had been exposed in another city, and a note that read, "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the system really does work. D.W." She smiled and filed the clipping in her desk drawer next to dozens of similar stories from around the country. The network they had exposed in court had tentacles everywhere. But now those tentacles were being systematically cut off. Justice might be slow, but when it finally arrived, it was thorough, and sometimes that was enough.